AchtungMillwall supports the Lions Food Hub, and all of our advertising revenues will be donated to support this fantastic initiative. It's now based at the Lions Centre on Bolina Road, and it's run by our own Kelly Webster. This is a friendly food bank supporting families in the Bermondsey and SE16 area. If you can help support the Lions Food Hub in any way, please visit @Lions Food Hub on Twitter or get in touch with us at AchtungMillwall. The Lions Food Hub. Come on, you Lions.
You're listening to AchtungMillwall, broadcasting from the beautiful South Bermondsey. Accept no substitute.
Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to another edition of Nick and Neil's History Hour, and we have a very special, semi-regular guest now. It's Merv Payne. Welcome back to the show, Merv. How you doing, mate?
Thanks, Nick. Hi, Nick. Hi, Neil.
Hello, boys.
And Merv has another new book. I was just saying off air, listeners, I am insanely jealous of Merv's ability to generate content, because I start writing and I normally, if I get to the end of the page, I think I've done really well. But you have an ability to keep writing and producing good quality content, Merv. How do you do it, mate? What's your secret?
I don't know. I say I've tried it for years and never got beyond chapter 1 myself. But in my job at the time, when I was working, I worked at a newspaper and I did some stuff for magazines and stuff. And I would always infuriate the sub-editors. So I would always go way over with my copy. That side of my writing is terrible, really badly difficult. Drive Colin, the poor sub, absolutely mental. He gets to use his lunch hour trying to chop it all down to fit, and he'd moan that don't you understand when you're told how many parts to submit, that sort of thing. So it's nice to be able to have like a bottomless pit of sort of pages to write on, and it's the old rule applies. They say write about what you know, write what you know, and or what you're passionate about, and I'm just really passionate about the Millwall story, really. As again, we said off air, we talked about James Murray's book, The Lions of the South, and how it's just such a brilliant, comprehensive history of the club, and the detail and the stuff that he pulls out. And it unfortunately finished just before our sort of greatest ever season. And I did hope that he would continue it. I think I made contact with him a few years ago, and he said there wasn't much chance of that. I think he's too involved with whiskey now, apparently. The whiskey Bible, apparently, which is a fair play to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's say, without wishing to suggest that I'm anywhere near as the quality of Lions of the South, I just thought, wouldn't it be nice to sort of pick up that story where he left off and do it. And the latest one, the 90s, so I had to have a good think first about, is there anything worth writing about? And as it transpired, there's so much went on in the 90s, I had to split it into two halves, because I started writing, and it was just crazy. Every single season there seemed to be something. There didn't seem to be a dull, boring, plod along season. So, but yeah, there's plenty of content there.
Neil, I was just saying off air to Merv, the Millwall story. In a way, this 5-year period, we're talking to Merv about 95 to 99, 2000-ish, I guess. The Millwall story, pretty much from creation, Neil, has been one of hope, followed by a crushing kind of disaster, followed by a rebuild and hope, and then another crushing disaster of some sort. And this period almost sums it up in a microcosm, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I know we nearly went out of business, I think, when we left the athletic grounds, wasn't it?
Yes, right.
Old Isle of Dogs days, when there was some doubt whether or not the club would carry on. And we seem to have lurched from one financial disaster to the other, haven't we? But we always seem to come out of it a lot stronger, don't we? And in a lot better place. And certainly this period encapsulates that. Nearly going broke, Theo coming in, taking over.
Yep.
And then we rebuilt with probably one of the best young sides we've ever had. And that led to probably the best 2 or 3 seasons that most people will remember, apart from obviously getting promoted to the First Division.
Absolutely.
Reaching an FA Cup semi-final and winning it, and getting to an FA Cup final, even though we didn't really turn up. Playing in Europe, nearly getting promoted to the Premier League, and and what happened that day and the repercussions after that lasted for 3 or 4 years. And then John Berylson eventually came in, and look where we are now. So if you actually look through Millwall history, you're right. There are these periods where there are dark days where you think, oh no, this is where the football family are finally going to get their wish and
do away with us.
And then all of a sudden we ended up reborn and reinfused, and we're back at our own level, aren't we?
Absolutely. I've got to praise your title of the book. I think it's a fantastic, probably your best title. So I haven't read the book. I've yet to see the content, listeners, but the title, South Bermondsey Homesick Blues, I think that's the best title of the bunch that you've had so far, mate. Well done for that one.
I don't know where I come up with them myself, to be honest, because that's quite often the hardest bit, because you obviously want something that's going to be eye-catching. With my second one, I was lucky because it just has the shirt from the promotion season, that iconic sort of shirt from the First Division days, and that sort of, I probably didn't need to put a title on that one at all, but the whole natural hire thing came in.
Yeah.
Into place. But sometimes it's hard. But I mean, for me personally, that period, the mid-90s, I think it was very easy to blame any sort of bad times on the move from the old den, because it was something, I think, one of my first memories when I started down the late 70s was talk of the Super Den.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I mean, it always would come up and it would die off again. Then we had the Asda partial redevelopment that went away. So I think when it was sort of suggested in the mid or the early 90s, people just said, "Oh, it won't happen." But then obviously, Reg Burr was clearly more of a man of action than the rest. And when it did actually happen, I think it was a real shock. I think probably more than, I know all fans will say this, but I think more for Millwall fans to leave their original stadium than any other fans, to be honest. And our first season at the new ground was actually quite good, playoffs, and we were pretty damn unbeatable at home. But it just didn't seem. Still, I can remember those games and playing when we, playing teams, and you felt teams started to enjoy coming to play us at our place, which didn't sit right, unless it was a game, a cup game or a playoff game, and the place was 3/4 full or full to the rafters. It just didn't feel right, and I sort of at the time was perhaps blaming everything on the move. This all started with moving grounds. If we'd been at the old den, we'd have beaten Derby in the playoffs and all stuff like that. So I mean that's probably where it came from. So hopefully I won't get sued by Bob Dylan. I shouldn't do that.
I shouldn't have thought so.
2 points on that actually. If you actually, the old den was a shithole, but it was our shithole, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah.
Let's face it. And you speak to any old opposition player, and I speak to a few doing stuff, and you get around the conversation that you support Millwall, and they say, and to a man, they all say, "I hated playing at the den." With the old den, there was just something about it. It's almost like we had teams almost half beaten before they turned up a lot of the time, didn't we? Especially in the big games, because they just knew there was going to be that evil atmosphere that went around the place. And Reg, let's face it, Reg Bird deserves a lot more credit than he actually gets, I think, in the history of our football club. He wasn't afraid to put his money where his mouth is, I think, as you and Nick have both said. He promised us all sorts. I'm still waiting for the McDonald's and the pizza up in the concourses that he originally promised us. But it just was more sanitized, wasn't it? It wasn't the old den, and it lost that aura.
Definitely,
where teams were afraid of us because we were a lot further back from the pitch, weren't we? And you couldn't get really up close, and everybody sat down. But we had to leave the den because, unfortunately, it just wouldn't have met with the Taylor requirements, would it? And it would have just cost too much. Quite ironically now, we know they're talking about safe standing. We could probably get away with it.
I think the old den, much as we all love it, and the three of us have all well remember it, but the times had moved along enough for it to be it just wasn't practical. And obviously the building of the new Den, as it was called initially, on the new London Stadium, because they tried to change the name, listeners, at the time, and that never stuck. But that was predicated on selling the land for the construction of the Fairview estate, wasn't it? The rather average looking red brick 80s 90s estate that replaced the old Den. My breath is still taken away. I mean, just to follow up on Neil's point about the ambition of Reg Burr, my breath is still taken away a little bit by what he achieved, because I well remember walking into the new ground on that opening night against Sporting Lisbon, Merv, and my breath was taken away. I can still remember the vision of it now. I thought, it was, fuck me, we've done this, Millwall, you know, look at it. It was magnificent.
And it's such a shame because it was built for the Premier League at the time.
Yeah.
And we came so close to we came close to actually starting life in the Premier League in there, you know, the previous season, when we should have perhaps done so much better than we did. And then to come closer still. And I think had we perhaps achieved Premier League football in it early on, then things may well have been different. You know, who can tell? But yeah, there's no doubt Burr, I mean, his sort of parting speech was in the programme when he left, because when the book starts, it picks up the 95-96 season. Burr handed the reins over to Peter Mead, and just his, you know, when he would always come out in support of Millwall fans. He'd always fight our corner. You know, we had chairman before who would, I mean, I can remember Alan Thorne basically threatening to shut the club down.
Yeah.
After the crowd trouble at Slough in the cup, you know, and just calling us scum. And you think, you know, obviously you're upset and you're annoyed when there's trouble, but Burr realised that it wasn't everyone, and it was blown out of proportion. And he really fought our corner, you know, and he did it genuinely. It wasn't just paying lip service. You know, he did it with real sincerity, which was, I think, nice. And it's always, I mean, a chairman's position they're in an invidious position. They'll always get blamed for everything. They'll always get told to spend more. And so, but I think Burr he had, for a little bloke, he had broad shoulders. You know, he definitely deserves a lot more credit, as Neil says.
I mean, the story of the 90s probably really begins largely with the construction of the new Den, which was the 1993-94 season. We had the near miss playoff season that year, Neil, which finished in mayhem, and then we will say no more than that.
Yeah, for a change,
just leave that. And then we had the kind of the twilight of the Mick McCarthy era, which would really lead us into Merv's period, which, I mean, the 94-95 season was notable for its cup run, really, boys, wasn't it? And I sometimes think that was Mick McCarthy's season period in a nutshell. There was something slightly surface about it and nothing substantial beneath.
Yeah,
you know?
I think the thing with that season was we had a suspended penalty hanging over us.
We did. Yes.
So I think, as I mentioned, that was like the closing chapter in my previous book, and I think that all Reg Burr wanted was a really quiet season, and we ended up drawing Arsenal and Chelsea in the FA Cup, and playing Chelsea away, and it goes to penalties, and he's probably looking at it through his hands, but you know, we came through it unscathed, luckily.
Yeah.
But I think apart from the cup runs, probably the most notable point must have been Andy May's dad, I think, at that 94-95.
Yeah, that was a one-man protest, wasn't it? Yeah.
The dullest one of the 90s, but it was a necessity, and we sort of came out of it. And then went into that 95-96 season quite bizarrely, with some investment probably not seen since the 87-88 investment, but it was very, very different. That was the key. That was the crucial thing. You know, it was something that Millwall didn't really do, and that was splash out money on other teams' players. You know, and it was a very big gamble to get into the Premier League, which at the time seemed quite a reasonable one, because we weren't spending massive amounts, although no one was at the time, really. I think part of the book is given over to sort of other news items at the time, you know, other transfers, other big football stories, transfers and players. Chelsea buying players like £2.5 million at the time, which seems like nothing now. But to bring in like Malkin and Fuchs for like about £1 million, and both had proven they could score goals at that level, you sort of thought, well, yeah, this makes sense, you know, what can go wrong? But as we remember, quite a lot.
I mean, the 95-96 season, there was probably the most disastrous Well, it's a hard pick to find the most disastrous season in Mill history, but this must be a contender, mustn't it, Neil? I mean,
I think so. Yeah.
to go from top to bottom, or no, near bottom,
Yeah.
in one season is an achievement.
You speak to a lot of former players, and I've spoken to a few doing interviews, and that FA Cup run, and I think we also got to the League Cup quarter-final.
We did.
Yeah,
we did.
They think that actually cost us promotion, that we'd have been in and around the playoffs. As you say, it made total sense because we had the building blocks there. We had the foundations of a very, very, very good team.
Yeah.
And for once, I know that people these days, they say, oh, well, just wish that John Berylson, and I'm guilty of it, as anybody else on live streams and things like that, that you just say, just go out and just invest in the strike that we need.
Yeah.
And he went out and invested in a couple of strikers that he thought we needed.
Yeah.
Or, but the chairman, the club did at the time. And it spectacularly backfired on us, didn't it? It nearly cost us Millwall Football Club again.
Couldn't blame him. Fuchs' record at Middlesbrough on loan at Middlesbrough was brilliant, and we just couldn't believe we managed to get him. He was able to sign him, and Malcolm was a regular scorer for Tram. They always seem to score against us.
Yeah.
So you thought, well, what a great bit of business! And you've basically gone out and bought the two form horses as far as strikers are concerned at that level, rather than taking a punt on a lower league player or an aging sort of top flight striker, and everything else seemed to be okay, But I think one of the strange moves was we let Mark Beard go to Sheffield United. He was one of the remaining prospects or sort of products of the youth setup, and we've seen a lot of homegrown players leave, mostly to bloody Wimbledon. We've seen Cunningham go and Goodman go, and it was a strange, very un-Millwall-like sort of thing to say to sort of ship out the youngsters and bring in these players from other clubs when we normally do it the other way around. I think Roberts went to Palace as well, but
he did.
It was all to fund this rebuild, and at first it seemed to be going okay. As late as December we were top of the league until that fateful match at Sunderland. But I think we beat West Brom at home. I think they were second. They were third at the time. We were second, or we had
2-1. Yeah.
But you left the matches thinking, well, we're top, but we didn't have that sort. Even 87, 88, when we couldn't really get into the top sort of 5 or 6 places. We seemed to have that little bit of quality about us, and we felt the opposite was perhaps true. Fate was being a bit unfair, but you did feel like we were pulling the wool over people's eyes in 95, 96, and it was soon to be proven, I think.
I mean, underpinning this season was the story of Mick McCarthy, a manager that I've never taken to Mick McCarthy. I'll lay my cards on the table, chaps. I mean, we're all adults here. I've never believed in him, and I think it was possibly it was this season in a sense that summed him up. There was always less to him than that met the eye. You're right, Merv. We were top of the league going into December, but it was one of those odds things where you just wondered how, and it didn't seem to be built on anything substantial. But Mick McCarthy, all really up until his departure, which I think was it January or February, finally went to take the Irish job, was underpinned by whatever Jack Charlton. Was he going to retire? Was he going to carry on for the Republic of Ireland? And that seemed to dictate McCarthy, and I'm sure that uncertainty fed into the squad, because we just went to pieces after being top of the league, listeners, in December. As late as December, I think we were still in 6th position in, I'm just looking at my history site. The end of January, we're still in 6th spot, chaps, and contrived for it to fall away completely and get relegated in 22nd position by May.
Yeah, we talk about that Sunderland game, but the rot had actually set in a little while before that.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Well, it was the November. And I think that was I think we'd gone 5 or 6 games without winning before.
We had a losing streak across, 25th of November, we got beat at Stoke 1-0. Then you're right, Neil, it's consistent loss, draw, loss.
And that was the culmination of it. Having our asses handed to us at Sunderland
6-0.
Was actually the culmination of it, I think. But I covered Millwall around about that time for the Mirror and various other people.
Right.
And you always got the impression that there was a bit of an undertone with Mick McCarthy. I can remember turning up to meet Casey Keller to go for lunch one day, and we met at the training ground. And because McCarthy hadn't invited me in, he almost frog marched me outside the main gate. And things like that. And I was just waiting there because I was friendly with Casey Keller at the time, and we were going to go. Well, we were going to go for lunch,
Yeah.
and I wanted to do a magazine piece with him.
Okay.
Yeah, those were in the days when you could just pick up a phone up a player, and say, "Do you fancy going out for a couple of drinks and something to eat? I want to write a magazine piece with you." And he said, "Yeah, fair enough." So we arranged to meet up, and I saw McCarthy at a couple of games after that, and there was always a slight sinister undertone to him. It was almost as if he made up his mind that he didn't like me, and that was well, I can quite understand. I don't like him.
But McCarthy, I mean, I was just a fan standing on. Well, it's not standing on the halfway line, was I? I wasn't when he started, and then I was sitting in the in the West Upper by the time he finished. But I always had the impression, it might have been fed by the fanzines, because that was your only real route into the what might really be happening at the club, with the Lion roars and no one likes us and the like at the time. But I always had a sense, boys, that McCarthy didn't like Millwall very much either. You know, there was a kind of like a mutual wariness on both sides toward him.
Hate, if you like, or dislike. But I think I actually think that's carried on for years, isn't it? Because every time McCarthy has brought a team back, all as you've heard is McCarthy, you're a cunt. Sorry for anybody that was taking our language, but you've got to say these things.
I did try to get to the bottom of this a little bit, because I remember, I think it might have been on House of Fun a few years ago, and took it with a pinch of salt, but someone claimed to have bumped into McCarthy in Chislehurst. I think it was where he was living at the time. He was still doing the Ireland job, and they sort of didn't let on who they supported, and they just sort of generally got into a bit of football chit chat, and claimed that he actually said he actually hated Millwall and the fans. And I thought, part of me think, you can imagine him being that candid and being that. But at the same time, the players that I spoke to said no, he didn't really have a problem. I think McCarthy is a manager's manager. He's his own man.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And
yeah,
he won't sort of toe the club line. He basically say, I'm Mick McCarthy. I'm the manager. I'm not Ipswich manager. I'm not Wolves manager. I am the manager. I won't sort of. Whereas you look at someone like, to coin a Ian Holloway phrase, all fans didn't get him. I think McCarthy is very much a football manager who you've got to get. Whereas obviously with Mill, it's the other way around. You've got to get Mill if you're the manager, otherwise you're not going to succeed. And I think Mick McCarthy's
old school.
Yeah, I think his attitude is if I'm going to be manager, I'm going to be manager, and that's that. I'm not going to kowtow to the fans. I'm not going to try and get them on side. I've got my way of managing, and that's what I'll do. And Alex Ray in particular said he took to him because he said he just told it to you straight. So there was no bullshit. There was no sugarcoating stuff. In fact, one of his stories was that one of the first things he did when he was manager was he asked Alex to move from centre midfield to right, and Alex said, I don't want to do that. So he put him on the bench for 6 games. They said, I'm not going to play you then. So
one of our greatest talents. Yeah, we can stick him on the bench. Yeah.
I want to play you Saturdays. And he said, whereabouts? He said, on the right. And he sort of grudgingly said, well, okay then. He said, he played me on the right and I scored 2 goals. He said, I realised then if your manager tells you to play on the right or on the goal, just bloody do it. But he said, he knew his own mind. He wouldn't back down, which will work great at certain clubs. And I think there's a good reason he's still manager 30 years later, to be fair to him.
With some success as well, Merv. I mean,
absolutely, and I think, certain managers with the certain ways, as we saw with Ian Holloway, will not work at Millwall. And I think we got on for a little while with Mick, and it sort of chugged along. But I think it was one of those relationships that was always on the verge of breakdown.
I mean, he would leave us. I think it was January. Someone out there may correct me. It might have been Feb. I can't remember now.
It might be early Feb, because I think it was
early Feb.
Very early February. I think his last match in charge was actually the first game of February that year. So.
Okay. Yeah. And then we briefly had Ian Evans in caretaker management, and then he would also, I think, leave to go and join Mick McCarthy in the Irish position.
Yeah, he's been McCarthy's sidekick everywhere he's gone, really, hasn't he?
Yeah. And then in my inimitable way, I always fall for the hope, boys. And when Jimmy Nicol arrived, I actually felt hopeful. I bought it, Neil. I bought it.
Yeah, well, I felt the same way when Lomas came in.
I know. You do, you try your best.
You want to believe it, Merv, don't you? You want to believe it.
You really try, and then they just break you down. But I remember getting a call from my dad quite late at night. So I know Nicholas got the job. I remember thinking, that's a really good move. You know, someone young. That's the sort of manager that bloody Palace would go on a point and then instantly get promoted with. You know, and the next big thing. I thought that could be good. I thought, you know, now we've got some good players and. We've got the Russians, you know, we've got these two in but, I mean, it was just, when you look at it like this, that season was just literally the perfect shitstorm, basically. Every single element was just wrong, you know, the managerial situation, the Russians, which I've heard from one player that I spoke to, despite Mick's programme notes at the time saying how pleased he was to have got the deal over the line, how hard they all worked, and how keen he was to get him in. According to one player, he knew nothing about it at all.
Right.
Evolving whatsoever. He was just told, look, we're getting these in, and you need to play them, and that was it. And so again, there's another problem right from the start. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know, but you know that's what I was told in good faith.
Yeah, well, I was led to believe that it was all driven by Peter Mead at the time. I don't know. I think we'll probably have to get Peter Mead on the podcast, Nick.
That would be an idea. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested.
Well, just to actually clarify the point, but I was under the understanding that Mick McCarthy didn't have an awful lot to do with signing.
Uran and Kulkov, Sergei Uran, Vladimir Kulkov.
He pitched up one day and he was told, right then, you're signing these two.
I mean, Peter Mead was an advertising executive, wasn't he? That was his. That's where he made his career.
Yeah.
And as so often, and I don't know if it's a Millwall thing, Merv, but I mean, what seems like a good idea on the surface, and that any other club, it may well have really worked.
Yeah.
It's that we've acquired two Russian, highly talented players. I mean, whenever you saw them, yes, they're out of condition, but you could see they had touch and vision, and they were a different level. It's just that they couldn't keep out of the bar, you know.
For Russian players at the time, I think Brighton signed a guy called Gotsmanov.
Yeah.
And Sergei Boltacher, whose son ended up playing by Rob.
Yeah.
So there was a movement towards bringing these Eastern Europeans in who, but let's face it, they were all technically good players.
They were World Cup stars. Yeah,
that's right. And on the face of it, it should have been, but I think probably London was probably the reason. Bright lights, the readiness of vodka and nightclubs, and crashing Porsches or whatever else they got up to. I think our location was probably against us. They probably needed a nice rural place where there was absolutely nothing to do, and they'd have probably taken off because they'd have just been able to concentrate on football.
Yeah, it's one of the great what ifs of Mill history. I think if only the Russians had kind of got fit and made it happen, and they were a level above many of our own players, but they were just so out of condition. And
the Russians hadn't have been bloody signed in the first place, but then again, we wouldn't have this glorious period to talk about.
No, and it would all culminate, of course, Merv, in the last day draw at Ipswich, which sent us down in 22nd position, having been top of the table in December. A very Millwall story, isn't it? You know,
and I think what's even more Millwall was a few games before. I think 4 games before that, we played Birmingham at home in a good game, beat them 2-0.
Yeah,
and we got to the magic 50 points. I think it was, or 51. No,
51. Yeah.
And basically saying, hardly anyone goes down with 51 points. We've got 4 games left. That, you know, we're sorted. We're okay. And it was almost like a promotion celebration. Or
Go and have a drink with Sergei and Vladimir.
That night, you know, there was almost and like they sort of relax, and then the very next game we go and get slaughtered by Oldham and
3-0 at Huddersfield.
Went to Huddersfield and got beat 3-0, and it was like they had their feet up, and you start looking at teams that look doomed, like Watford and Luton, and they're starting winning. You think, hang on, and Portsmouth, and you're thinking, hold on, we actually could still be in trouble. And you thought, well, surely we'll get a couple of points. And then, the problem that also was, I think Luton and Portsmouth had games in hand and they whittled them away. And suddenly we're down to that last day and it's almost out of your hand. You have to win. And so often in the past, Millwall have risen to that challenge. I mean, I think the most memorable for me was Chesterfield away in '83.
Yeah.
Win there, and we did, and stayed up. But there was a real air of inevitability about it, and the fact that Portsmouth's winning goal at Huddersfield was set up by Jimmy Carter was quite ironic as well. And the whole thing just seemed sadly sort of Millwall fate, really. And I just remember that it was the weirdest feeling ever, because just to actually try and let it sink in that we've been relegated, you just couldn't get your head around it. But it was completely bizarre. Yeah.
I'm just looking at that final day team there. I mean, it's like looking at one of the old Greek ruins, where you can see the glory that was, only it's all cracked and bits are falling off now. You've got Casey Keller in goal. Connor, who is Connor? He's gone out of my head. Connor.
James Connor, I think that
James Connor. Wow.
Really good youth prospect. And so often the Millwall way, he broke in the first team, got a bad injury, and was never seen again, really. So
Connor, gone out of my head.
You've been reading the book I've written, Merv, and sank you, haven't you?
in the Millwall Who's Who, yeah, definitely.
But then we've got Ben Thatcher, who would be player of the season that year. Great defender, and he would move on, obviously, with relegation. Bobby Bowery, less so, but willing enough. Jason Van Blurk, Keith Stevens, the old warhorse. Weir, was that Dave? Was it Davey Weir? Was Pete?
Mickey Weir.
Mickey Weir.
Yeah.
Morris Doyle, Dave Savage, Chris Malkin, Ricky Newman, not Gerard, Ricky Newman, Tony Witter, Lucas Neal, and Rogan on the bench. So there were some great players mixed in with some less great names on final day there.
Yeah.
And so
that team should still actually have been good enough.
It should have been.
To have actually stayed up. But the trouble is with football, once you get on a roll, it's very difficult to get off a roll, whether or not you're winning matches, and even more so when you're losing matches. Yeah, you have the odd good results, which I think was that 2-0 win.
Yeah.
But you've still got that slump.
Achtung, Millwall.
96, 97, Merv, would be as close as we've come, really, to non-existence. We went into administration, still managed by Jimmy Nichol. Things would not improve. I mean, we actually weren't doing badly in the league at one point.
Again, it was one of those seasons. We started off, we ditched Captain Morgan as a sponsor. We had South London Press sponsoring us.
That's right. Yeah.
A bit more of a togetherness, a bit more of a bringing the Millwall thing back, and we invested in a lot of Nichols ex-players from Rafe, Crawford, Hartley, Dare, Davey Sinclair. And it looked okay. And we got Huckabee in when we had our usual injury jinx, and Darren Huckabee looked just a different level. And there was talk at the time. Again, we talk about Peter Mead, who's a great bloke, lovely bloke, there's lots of good things at Millwall. But as you say, he's an advertising man, so a lot of it's in the cell. And at the time, we were led to believe that we were in the market to actually pay Newcastle the £1 million they wanted for Huckabee, if they would agree to let him go. But the problem was then the loan system was different. You couldn't loan someone for a whole season. You could loan them, I think, for a month. And they had to go back. And Keegan insisted he wanted Huckabee was part of his plans, so he went back. So we plodded on without him. Actually did quite well when he went. And then Newcastle promptly sold him to Coventry for £1 million. So it was one of those weird sort of things. You wonder how much you're being told by the press and stuff about what's going on at the club is to be believed. But yet you feel at least, we must have money to spend. We must be in reasonably good health, money-wise. And then suddenly, I think it was on the terraces at Stockport County, we were getting battered 5-1. And a word had been announced, we'd gone into administration, and then, dozens of club staff were being laid off, and they were looking for a buyer. And very, very quickly, the reality was that, the club was very close to going out of business. And I spoke to a few people. I spoke to Jeff Burnage as well, and I said, look, just how close did we come? Because at the time, the stories of Theo Pafitis interest had gone around the club for a long time, right from the start of administration. He was clearly keeping an eye on things there. But Jeff said there was so many sort of hurdles to overcome in Theo's sort of deal for him to sort of take it on, that we came very, very close to actually, not
making the deadline. Yeah,
you have to make two sort of promises to the football authorities. First of all, you have to promise them or prove to them you can finish the season, but then almost immediately, and you can beg, borrow, and steal and shift money about and to do that, but then almost straight away they want to know, can you prove you can get through next season? And I think that was the real stumbling block, was finding that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, we did come closer than a lot of people imagine, I think, to actually going out of business. There certainly wasn't anyone outside of Mill that was willing to sort of like wish us well and hope for our sort of survival. So yeah, I think it was a very scary time where we went from challenging for the Premier League to sort of fighting for our existence. So to actually be in a situation where we still had a club was a great relief, I think.
Well, we weren't the only club at the time, of course, to go through it. I think it was quite a regular thing.
Yeah.
In days, there wasn't a week went by when there wasn't a club that was whose mere existence was threatened. I think just before then, Aldershot had gone out of business, hadn't they?
Yeah.
Newport County and things like that. So,
Yeah.
so there were always clubs lurching from one disaster to the next. And of course, that season started with that bloody cup defeat at Woking.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, that's right.
We had a lot of clubs at the time, because again the rules were different. A lot of clubs would put themselves into administration so they could basically write off their debts and start again. They pissed a load of money up the wall trying to get success. It hadn't worked, and they thought, okay, we'll go into administration, start up a new version of the club or the company, and start from scratch. And all the creditors get 20p in the pound or whatever. And obviously now you get points deductions and that sort of thing. But
that led to that rule, I think, about 10 or 15 years later, didn't it?
Yeah.
When they finally got pissed off with clubs doing that, and I think, and I think it was just after it happened to us a second time, about 10 years later, that they actually brought that rule in.
I think the impression of the non-financial person or the average fan was that, as you said there, Neil, that administration would be done almost as a kind of as a ploy to gain financial advantage in some way, relaunch yourself and, come back. A bit like Keith Richards used to have his blood transfused before a tour, and you come back almost renewed in some way. And for reasons that are probably too deep for us to go into today, it never seems to work out quite that way with Mill. There never seems to be that many people willing to take us on, and love him or hate him. And he's a Marmite character, Theo. But I mean, as you said there, Merv, I mean, we really were ticking down to the last few minutes, I think, before the deal was done. It came that close.
Put it that way. There wasn't a queue of people after Theo to sort of have a go. And like I say, there's very few chairmen that ever stay popular forever. And Theo had his knockers, but he was just what Millwall needed at the time. He was a man of action. He put his money where his mouth was, and he was a man of ideas as well. Which breathed new life. He was one of these people who. He looked at every single corner of the club, no matter what it was, and sort of just injected energy into it and new ideas. And at the time, a few of them were sort of frowned upon, or we weren't too sure. I think the first thing he did was the home shirt had this bizarre sort of silver thing going, a silvery grey thing going on with the shorts, and obviously the weather in Norway. But he got us publicity, and he was one of these people that all publicity is good. I mean, one of the funniest things at the time was the pre-season photo call on the pitch, and you had Billy Bonds in his chinos and his club polo, Kirsten Imrie in the away shirt, the Patri model at the time, Zampa the Lion, I think, and there was the news bunny was there as well. So this rabbit who used to do mimes to the news on live TV, so it was almost like being on some sort of trip. But, I mean. The good thing about Theo was, and some of his programme notes were brilliant. He didn't pull any punches, and it was great. And again, like Burr, he would back the fans. That would obviously come to a head. That obviously finally tipped him over the edge with the Birmingham game, I think, the playoff game. Yeah,
it did.
Back the fans. He didn't just sort of toe the line of the Football League or the police, that sort of thing. He backed the fans up, and he whether our fans liked it or not, whatever we did later that they may have disagreed with, he did save the club. And he put them on a really good footing, and he recognised he was a football fan, a football person, and he recognised the importance of homegrown talent and of having an academy at the club. And suddenly we'd gone right back to where we were in the sort of the 80s, where we were developing our own talent and scouting our own local talent. And that was the start of it, really. You know, he admitted himself, he was the first to admit that some of his decisions, he got it wrong. And I think he said at the end of the season, he'd buy everyone a beer, and he did. You know, that first season, there was a little token in the programme, take it to the kiosk and
get yourself a beer.
Beer, you know, and that sort of thing. I think Millwall fans appreciate that, because they've had a lot of bullshit over the years. They've had a lot of promises made and broken. So, you know, Theo was one that kept his promises, and what was his choice of manager was probably one of the best things, because I don't think he truly appreciated. He was a good, knowledgeable football man, but I don't think he truly appreciated the culture at Millwall and thought that we might accept Billy Bonds as manager. but that was, again, he wasn't afraid to make a decision that would raise an eyebrow and say, look, just give me a chance, just see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, and within a year, he thought, right, I've got it wrong, I'll get rid of him. You know, and that was, you've got to respect that in a way.
You look at Theo's whole business career, it's been that he's bought companies. He bought Ryman when they were on their downers, and
He did,
various other companies, and he turns them around and then he flogs them on, if you like. And that's what he did at Millwall. Yeah, he came in to a club that was virtually bankrupt, or in fact, it was bankrupt.
Yeah.
And then he turns it around, and Millwall was good for Theo, and Theo was good for Millwall, because he got his profile raised at Millwall. People suddenly knew who Theo Paphitis was through all of these stunts, so it was a win-win situation. And but it's unfortunate the way that it turned out, but he made us feel good about ourselves again, didn't he? Yeah, we can always remember the live TV girls, Anne-Marie Foss and the other one, and it was just a fun time.
It seems, it's odd because nostalgia is a weird thing, boys. I mean, I well remember the what you said earlier on, Merv. There was kind of like a silver and blue combo for the shirt with this garish slogan, "The weather in Norwegian" on live TV. And I remember hating it at the time, and yet it's now become an iconic shirt that people will want to wear. Whereas once I would have said I wouldn't put any of them on there, but you know, it's weird the journey of nostalgia, how yesterday's garishness becomes today's what must have.
Similar to that Lewisham shirt that got us promotion in '88 and
first
season. I think you look at that shirt and you just think First Division, and I look at the live TV shirt and I can see the team, the players walking out at Wembley at that time after waiting so long for us to get to Wembley. And obviously, again, that's another typical Millwall story of raising your hopes and then crashing them again. But even so, we were so desperate to get to Wembley. And whenever I look at that live TV shirt, I think of that day. And that was like, again, another the fulfilment of another long dreamt of sort of dream for Millwall fans. But obviously, what we forgot to mention was that John Doherty came back briefly.
He did, yeah. It wasn't as successful.
It wasn't, and it was a strange time. Initially, he got them winning, and they were on the fringes of the top two, and then they just suddenly went on another downward spiral again, and it was another sort of end of season sort of slump. But it was just to say a bizarre time of managers, where one minute you've got John Doherty, who brought the club the greatest days of the history, and the next minute you've got Billy Bonds, who's like one of West Ham's favourite sons, you know.
But you speak to any of the players back then, and Merv probably has done for that book, for his new book. But the players genuinely liked Billy Bonds.
Yeah, I can imagine they would have done. Yeah,
and he seemed to work quite well with the players, and he brought on some very good players for Millwall, and brought some very good players in for the club. And you speak to a player, and they haven't got a bad thing to say about the guy. But for some unknown reason, it just didn't work out, did it? I don't know quite what it was.
Well, I mean, it was. I think it's without that the West Ham connection. But yeah, I mean, he had a very short but brilliant or perfect managerial CV, and he got West Ham into the First Division when we felt we should have got there back in '91.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. You're dead right, Neil. He basically brought through the nucleus of that great team of the early 2000s. Reed and Cahill and players like that came through on his watch. Not he couldn't take all the credit for them, but he was prepared to throw in people like Richard Sadley and Danny Hopton and get the young players in. And obviously his West Ham background, he knew the value of young homegrown players. But one of my favourite probably stories about Billy Bonds was towards the end of his only season when we signed Neil Harris. And we've been tracking him for some time, and time had come because it was getting close to transfer deadline day at the time, and it used to be at the end of March, and the time had come to make a decision on him. And Mick Beard at the time was on the academy and recommended him. And Bonds decided, after consulting all his ex-West Ham coaching staff, he didn't think it was worth a punt. So he said, "No, I don't fancy him. We'll move on. We won't take him up." And Mick Beard apparently said, "Look, you really do need to give this guy a chance. Just give him a go, even if it's just a 1-year sort of deal." So almost on Mick Beard's say so, he gave in and he signed Neil Harris, and he threw him straight into the first team. So he's playing Cambridge City, 5 levels below Mill in the league, straight in the first team. And Mick is convinced that he perhaps did that to try and prove a point.
Yeah.
He perhaps star on his arse. And
he played him on the wing as well, didn't he?
I think, yeah. And considering that, considering he'd been playing for Cambridge City one week and then at Mill in a pretty tough, rough third tier the next, in a team that was struggling a bit, he very quickly found his feet, and I think proved a lot of people wrong. But
Absolutely.
That's quite a sliding door moment, I think, in Millwall's history, possibly, because that's how close we come to not actually signing Neil Harris.
Football has these moments, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
I do think I agree that Billy Bonds is much maligned for irrational reasons. Really, he actually did build, or began the process of rebuilding that would start to come to pass in the 98-99 season, really, which would be under Keith Stevens. Club legend, really, but he never seems to quite get the credit, Rhino, does he? That other club legends get is always a by the way slightly, but I think he was a great servant for Millwall Football Club. And then he would manage as a sole manager for 98-99. I don't know to what level McCleary came in during the course of that season or how it worked, but they've become joint managers eventually. But
it's a strange one how that worked out, really. But I think, like I say, the Defeatist figured out pretty quickly the Millwall sort of culture. And funnily enough, I think Billy Bonds started one of his program notes once saying something like, "Look, I know you're never going to like me," or something, or I know. It was. I've got it down somewhere. I think it's in the book. I think, but it was quite maybe quite like very deadpan. Like, "I know you don't like me, but I do want to do well for this club. So got to get on." But
that's great stuff.
Summed up that lack of tolerance. Of an ex-West Ham player as a Millwall manager is going to get a lot less time to a lot less.
Well, I mean, Lomas is probably the great example of that. It didn't work out. Let's put it that way for Steve Lomas.
Right from the start, yeah. But Stevens at the opposite end of the scale. Every Millwall fan knew him. And he had McCleary in there as well. And you're looking at two players who come through the youth team, through the club, local lads, knew the club inside out, had experienced the best of times of the club, and also perhaps the worst. And just knew they had a plan, basically. That's, I think, the bottom line in football is, I think, this is coming from a fan who's watched a lot of football, not from someone who's got a coaching badge or anything like that. But I think it's fair to say football is a very, very simple game. And I think when you overcomplicate it, that's when the problems start. Certainly, obviously, at Premier League level, there's a lot more to it. But I think when you're talking at third tier football, even professional football, I think it's quite simple. And I think Stevens and McCleary realised that. They realised what they had to work with. They realised what they had coming through, and the best way to go about it. And they developed quite a very simplistic system of having every single team, from the juniors to the youth to the reserve, whatever, the academy, playing the same system right the way through. So it made the transition of players easier. And that showed he was quite happy to throw someone like Paul Eiffel in straight in the first team if he'd had a few good games for the academy or for the youth, and it was a big gamble, but it paid off massively, because that was a huge transitional season, that sort of 98-99, obviously culminating in Wembley.
Yeah, and I mean, Neil, what a lift to the spirits going to Wembley was. I genuinely never imagined I'd ever see Millwall Football Club take the field at Wembley Stadium ever.
Yeah, but then how many times have we done it since?
Yeah,
But it was a spark, wasn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, well, we
yeah.
didn't only go to Wembley, we actually invaded Wembley.
We did 55,000. Yeah, that's right.
And we took over Wembley, and we take over Wembley every time we go there. There's nothing more that Millwall love than a bit of glory hunting, isn't there? People who haven't been for years are suddenly phoning you up. Your phone goes alarm. You get us a Wembley ticket. And how do we get Wembley tickets? I was at Carlisle on a Tuesday night 40 years ago, and that's that sense of entitlement. But no, that Wembley game, I think, was unlucky in one that Paul Shaw wasn't fit.
Yeah, a good striker, Paul Shaw. Yeah,
brilliant striker. Yeah,
and he was a goal scorer. And I think he told me that he had a shoulder operation or something leading up to that final, and it was just about 2 or 3 weeks too soon for him.
Yeah,
we had. I mean, similarly, you look at the FA Cup final. Obviously, we didn't have Sissoko, who was sent off at Forest a few weeks before, quite unfairly. And we didn't have Muscat, who had a bad injury.
Yeah, he was injured. Yeah,
key players
didn't play.
Yeah, and then with the Wembley final against Wigan, we had, obviously, as you say, Shaw was injured for a little bit. I think they tried to bring him back away to York the week before. I think he scored, and then he got injured again. But the biggest, I think, loss was Rishi Sadlier. It was for a bizarre reason that FIFA decided to play the under-18 World Championships in Nigeria, and obviously Richie had sadly been doing so well for Millwall. The FAI had noticed him and said, "Oh, we'll take you along for the ride. You'll probably only be on the bench." And of course, it coincided with the AWS final. And as it turns out, Sadlier did well. He scored goals. He got into the knockout stages. And I think the way it transpired was, I think they played the host Nigeria in the knockout game the day before.
Right.
So our only chance of getting him in was, well, it might have been a couple of days before. We had to hope that Ireland lost and we could get him home. And I think Sadlier gave him the lead, and they ended up losing on penalties. So it went as long as it could. And they literally rushed him. And in his own words, he went from, this is in his book actually, went from like the airport from Nigeria to the airport straight to Wembley. And as he walked out into Wembley, he didn't know what day it was or where he was, and he didn't know what was going on. So, but you know, a fully fit Rishi Sadlier, a fully fit Paul Shaw.
Yeah, may have been different.
Who knows what could have happened, but that's just yet another of those.
Yeah, it was probably one of the worst games that Wembley's ever seen, that one, wasn't it? It was absolutely bloody awful.
We had one little half chance, I think, where a Harris shot was kicked off the line, and other than that, yeah, I mean, it was so inevitable. The last minute Wigan goal was just inevitable, really. Just so typically Millwall.
My memories of the day are quite are more about the places like Victoria Station and Wembley Park and the tubes and because for anyone who never went to the old Wembley Stadium, the view was appalling. I mean, I was right down near the front of the terracing, behind the goal. So I mean, I remember the goal going in late for Wigan, but I couldn't tell you what it seemed to be like a scuffle at the other end of the pitch, I think, and it went.
Shot, wasn't it?
So that was all I could remember of it, you know.
Yeah, it was nice still to get at the old, because obviously the new Wembley's all very well and good.
Yeah.
Nice
the Twin Towers, the history, and all the rest of it.
Even that was a bit of a dump by then, it was still the history of the place.
Yeah, it was more about it.
Yeah, iconic.
Iconic, that's the word. Yeah.
Walk out of that tunnel. I mean,
Yeah.
I think of all the FA Cup finals I watched as a kid, and you see the teams coming out, those huge tunnels, and there's those images of Clough and Shankly looking at each other as they come out for the Charity Shield and that, and
Yeah.
and to see Millwall doing that, it's proper goosebump stuff, you know.
It's like the old Wembley was like a stately home where you wouldn't want to live in it, but it was magnificent to look at.
I once covered a game. I once covered a Rugby League Cup final there.
Okay, yeah.
And you're allowed in the dressing rooms after the game.
Yeah.
To interview the players. So you went in the dressing rooms, and the only way to get back into the press box was to actually walk up the tunnel.
That's wonderful.
And walk across that bit of the walk that took you behind the goals, and then you went up one of the you went up one of the aisles,
Oh, right.
and it is a goosebump moment.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine.
Walking out the tunnel at Wembley, and you just, your mind just goes to what a great place it was. And you're right, it's not the same. You haven't got the Twin Towers. They should have left the Twin Towers
Oh,
up.
yeah, definitely, yeah.
I mean, it's a very nice stadium now. It's just another stadium.
Another new ground, yeah.
Sanitized, though. There's no atmosphere in there.
Oh,
is there?
No. I remember the Lion Roars, just to close us. I mean, the Lion Roars did a great front page. It was almost the best front page I've ever seen on a fanzine when we made it to Wembley, which was, I believe, in Miracles, and they'd had like a conga going on, I think, at Walsall, wasn't it, where we won over 2 legs. And I believe in Miracles probably is a great summary of that period from relegation in 1995-96 to the beginning of hope, I suppose, Merv. I mean, I'm going to guess your next book will cover the period after the Rhino and Macca era onwards, I'm guessing.
I've got to tackle the 2000s, really, unless I get bombarded on Twitter telling me to please stop.
Well, don't stop, because we get some great podcasts out of you, mate, when you do it.
I'll tell you what.
Keep going. I'll keep going. But I think the thing about that Wembley final, we may have lost it, but Perfetus was so stunned at the amount of fans that turned up. And being a businessman, he's thinking, well, there's 55,000 Millwall fans here.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying, if we can, you put his corporate head on, if we can sort of mouth shot all of these, and if we can get half of these at the Den every week, sort of thing. He realised then the potential of the club, that really rammed home the potential of the club for him, and thought, rather than just keeping it afloat, it's worth, really sort of pushing the boat out for. So, and I think that again is what led into that really good period at the end of the early 2000s. But yeah, I mean, I definitely want to cover that next, without a doubt, and continue the story, because again, crazy amount of stuff went on in just the next few years, really, when you think about it.
Oh, mate, you talk to any of the players that were around from 2000 to 2004, 2005, and some of the stories that they tell you, it's absolutely mad, especially around Theo and what happened to the cup final poll and things like that. And when Dennis Wise came in, when he bought in Wise, and he had them fighting world champions in training. It's just, you talk about the crazy gang. This was on another level.
The name of this book, listeners, South Bermondsey Homesick Blues. When's it actually being published, Merv? When does it come out?
Coming out on the 2nd of October. It's available you can sort of pre-order it now.
Yep.
victorpublishing.co.uk/shop. Little web plug there.
Yeah.
So you can order it, and it's available on Amazon and that on the 2nd of October.
Lovely. We'll stick a link on for the Victor Publishing, because I've got that on my notes here. I'll stick a link into the show notes for that. South Bermondsey Subterranean Homesick Blues. No, Subterranean Homesick Blues. We'll stick a link on there. Huge thank you to Merv Payne and to Neil for joining us on the show today. We'll be back very, very soon, Neil and I, with another one of these history hours. I think that's an hour. So yeah, we'll be back very, very soon. Till the next show. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to AchtungMillwall. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a cheeky little review. Arrivederci Millwall. Till next time.
Who do you want to watch?